I firmly believe that we all have that one game that just refuses to leave us alone once we play it. Almost like an addiction, honestly. Whether this is good or bad depends on the situation. I have a few of these games, stuff like PlanetSide 2, Warframe, Total War 2, and Albion Online. Back when I really kicked it up with game variety after I finally switched to PC from growing up with consoles, I eventually happened onto League of Legends. At first it was horrible, but I set my mind to it after a year of ignoring the game completely and quickly got pretty decent with supports. It became an unhealthy addiction. I wanted to get ranked so badly I ended up completely ignoring life for a while. I said that to say this. Albion reminds me of League in more ways than one. It's got a similar control scheme, very similar feel, and in general has the same rage potential since you can literally lose everything you have if you die in a red or black zone. However, I feel like this particular specimen isn't quite as unhealthy for me as League. In this video, I hope to explain what I mean and bring you a fair view of Albion Online as a whole. Sit back, relax, keep all mounts stowed during the presentation, and if you have any tier 6 gear or higher, I'd recommend visiting your bank to drop it off before the end of the lecture. Let's boogie. So, what is this game? Albion Online is a free-to-play isometric MMORPG with full loot PvP and a lot of gathering and crafting. Oh, that was a mouthful. Everything in the game is player-made, except for raw materials, which are player-gathered or player-farmed. One of the big appeals for me was the fact that crafted items are most often stamped by their maker, so you can, in theory, get a reputation for making gear of a high enough level. Aside from that, there are plenty of dungeons to play with, an acceptable amount of PvE to make money or gather resources, and a whole continent, bigger than the base starting continent, dedicated to PvP and player autonomy. Now the big three questions. I'm going to hit all of these in one blast so I can get to the juicy bits, because this game is simultaneously really simple and exceedingly complex. It's fun if you're the type of player to enjoy that long but fruitful grind, which also plays into retention. You can do literally everything with one character, so in theory you can have everything maxed eventually. That gives you a lot of options for how to progress or respec if you don't like where you started without losing everything. As for accessibility, Albion avoids the arcade problem by A, making the game a bit more about skill than build, and B, having a full loot PvP system. Translation, if you get lucky and kill a guy with tier 8 max gear, you now own whatever parts of that gear didn't break when you killed him. Might not be able to use it yet, but you can sell it for a pretty decent profit or save it for when you can use it. And honestly, most people hover around tiers 4 to 6 for their PvP kit, which is very easy to get with most things. My main, for example, can do everything in the game at least up to tier 4 and quite a few things up to tier 5. And I only played for a couple of months when the game first released. So to summarize, the game is fun if you enjoy the controls and style. It has plenty to do for a long time if you're so inclined. The top guilds are basically small countries constantly fighting for control in the black zones, Albion's open PvP areas. It's easy to get into if you look up a guide or two, and you can always respec your build whenever you want without having to make an ult. Lastly, it's got plenty of content, both built into the game and as a result of feuding guilds and just players. It'll last you for a while. Now I can get into the rough bits, the reason I quit in the first place aside from raw burnout. Albion is actually kind of special to me, as it was the first game I did a proper, planned out guide for. It's still up if you're interested, though I'm not quite sure it's relevant anymore. This game ate my life. I mean that quite literally. Thankfully I wasn't in a relationship at the time, and my job was super chill, so on my off days I was logging 12 to 16 hours. That's how I got up so high, honestly. At first, I was the clan crafter, and with my hard-headed streak, I wanted to build and craft and gather everything we wore and used. Anyone who's played will attest that what I wanted was functionally impossible, especially with only a few months to do it. So it goes without saying that I burnt out hard and realized I was playing the game as a job, and it took me way too long to have this realization. That being said, what follows is going to be a short guide in case you do want to get in and try it for yourself. Albion is free to play with a premium model, but similar to EVE Online, you can buy premium with in-game currency. In fact, a lot of people have called Albion the fantasy version of EVE, and honestly, that's accurate to a certain extent. You can be a trader, crafter, miner, gatherer, bandit, hunter, almost anything you can think of. The options are endless. Hell, you can even go into stocks and be a gold trader if you want to. Ugh, weird. To get started, you'll go through a tutorial that does a pretty decent job of showing you how things work if you pay attention. Keep in mind, everything you take from these lessons, you'll be using that info a lot. So once you get plugged into the world, you're given a couple of quests and then basically cut loose. Now you have some decisions to make. Step 1, you'll need to figure out what kind of fighting you want to do. There are 3 trees each for weapon types and armor, those being the hunter, warrior, and mage weapon trees. Then for armor, the plate, leather, and cloth trees. Hunter Kit specializes in mostly high damage or high mobility, sometimes both. Warrior Kit focuses on CC or mob control with aggro, though it has plenty of uses in PvP, specifically the sword being one of the most annoying weapons to fight in general. The Mage Tree is your raw damage output with some healing in the Holy Staff and a lot of AoE and control options. I did forget to mention the Nature Staff and the Hunter Tree, which is more of a druidic kind of thing that heals over time. Combat can be boiled down into your 3 weapon abilities combined with your 3 armor abilities defined by your helmet, chest, and boot options. Speaking of, plate armor is obviously more defensive and has a number of self-healing or party support options, usually defensive, and is generally the tank or brawler of the party. Leather gear is more aggressive and sneaky with a few stealth options, but a couple like Bloodlust that are more geared towards brawling. Last is Cloth, which has the most attack bonuses and a number of nice control options for keeping you out of AoEs and away from enemy assassins. All in all, the gear is pretty intuitive as to its role, but all of them have a few different abilities, so you can really customize your setup. Once you figure out your build, which again you can respec at any time, it's time to figure out what you want to do for money. You can be a trader, a gatherer, a crafter, it's all up for grabs. It's pretty solid advice to say that you'll have some kind of gathering. It's just the best way to go out and essentially farm money. All 5 of the resources are viable, those being ore, stone, wood, leather, and fiber, so don't worry too much about what you pick unless you're planning to craft something specific. In that case, just go into your destiny board by pressing B, click on whatever something you want to craft, and scroll down. Once you get to the stats menu, it'll show you exactly what you need. It's also totally normal to have more than one gathering skill, so don't think you have to specialize too much. It's a good idea to specialize, don't get me wrong, that way you level a little faster, but you don't have to. So now what you do is you go out into the world, go do dungeons or fight mobs or gather your chosen resource, and do it until you level up enough to use the next tier of equipment. With gathering equipment, you can gather 1 tier higher than the tool you have. Example, you have a tier 3 pickaxe, you can gather tier 4 ore, but not the enchanted version, so say 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, those will be out of your reach. Which, it still gives you some options when you're out in the world, just stacking up for a big market sale. There is a market in every city, all localized, so if you want, you can gather in one place and travel to another to sell the goods, which in theory can work pretty well. You can also just figure out what the costs are in various cities and then run to a different city with those goods and make a profit. This is where the gatherers and fighters diverge. For fighters, once you hit tier 4 or 5, you're basically ready to hit the black zone, which is basically in-game. You won't dominate there, but you can hang with the big boys if you're canny and careful with your builds. For gatherers, you'll need to spend some time in the tier 5-ish areas, my recommendation, purely opinion, to get your skills up to spec, unless you're keen on really going ham. Once you get to tier 5 or 6, depending on how you want to play it, that's about where I recommend going to the black zone for more prolific and less contested resource deposits. This does also put you in the sights of the guilds who own those areas though, so keep that in mind. Lastly, for crafters, you can pretty well make a decent living just gathering materials and making a ton of gear to sell on the market, especially if you happen into a guild that has an island that you can use with their own refining and crafting facilities. That brings me to the most important part of this entire video. You want to play this game with a guild. It's so much better with a guild. In fact, it's not much fun playing solo if you want to do any form of PvP other than Hellgates, which are small dungeons with PvP enabled. Anything open world becomes extremely risky because that one miner you're chasing could be part of a Zerg guild that is bringing 50 guys to protect their favorite metal gatherer. So join a guild, if only to have people to hang out and go do things with. For gatherers, this is crucial. You want safety in the black zones with a full ox mount. Most active players in guilds will jump at the chance to hit the black zone, in my experience, if they don't already live there. There are places to set up shop inside the black zone too, so you might end up joining a guild with some real estate and not have to worry too much about getting jumped. And that is mostly it for the basics. I could go over islands and individual builds, but honestly you can do pretty well with just about everything. And the only thing you need to know about islands is don't build refining or crafting stuff there, because you won't get any return materials like you will from public or guild farms. Yes, it's counterintuitive, but it's the general consensus at the moment as far as I can tell. Public workbenches are where you want to craft if you can find a good one with low taxes, but guild island workbenches will work pretty well enough. Another reason to join a guild. Okay, that's about it. As with Warframe, I'm going to stop talking or I'll be here all day. Ladies, gentlemen, and otherwise, thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you did not enjoy, hit that dislike button and drop a comment letting me know what I can do to improve. Similarly, if you have questions, leave a comment and I'll do my best to answer. If you'd like to see more, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell so the YouTube Senpai algorithm remembers to tell you when I do things. Also, I have a Discord. I will leave a link below. Feel free to jump in and join me. Y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all next round.